Our guest today is someone who made international headlines last year. Of the many major changes amidst the music industry's Me Too movement, one of the biggest changes came last June when ARIA chair and Sony music boss Dennis Hanlon was ousted from both roles. It was a major move from both Sony and ARIA. Dennis had held his role as ARIA chair for more than 2 decades and had been a member of the ARIA board since 1984. So when Natalie Waller was announced as the brand new chair of ARIA, it was justifiably global news. For me, Nat was the obvious and welcome choice. She's been working at ABC Music since 1998. She's on the Country Music Association board and she's chair of the CMA Australian Task Force. She's also been head of ABC Music for a decade now. And while this chat was meant to take place at Big Sound this year, we finally have her here with us at the Bragg Media headquarters in Sydney. Nat, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yay.
Okay, I want to start with your origin story. How did you go from joining ABC Music in 1998 as a business assistant to heading up ABC Music and also becoming chair of ARIA?
Well, it wasn't planned, I'd say. Leaving school, tertiary education, I never thought to work in the music industry. I didn't really think that was a job that you could do unless you could sing or play an instrument, which I was unfortunately tone deaf as far as singing goes. And so I kind of just fell into working at the ABC through a friend of mine was working there and said, hey, there's a job going in music, and I didn't really know what that meant. And so, but I went for the job because I had business skills and I thought I could do this until I work out what I want to do. And once I went through the doors, I suppose I was like, wow, like, this is, a real job. This is actually an industry I'd love to work in. And the more, the more I learned and the more I worked in, the more I knew this was sort of the path I wanted to take. I mean, I wouldn't say at the time I knew. If I look back, I could, I sort of, it fell that way, I suppose. Like I went from business assistant to business coordinator, business manager, and I just progressed within the company, which is kind of a bit unusual these days. I suppose people jump around more, but my role changed so much and the industry changed so much. So I was always learning and always changing. So for me, as much as I've been at ABC Music for over 24 years, I've done so much in that time and learned so much, and everything's just changed so much. So yeah, so that's kind of how I ended up there. And as far as chair, to be honest, that was a complete surprise for me. I suppose, if I'm honest, I'd say that I didn't expect it at all. I expected it maybe to be one of the men on the board or majors, just because that's how it's always been. And as we know, we shouldn't expect how it's always been to be how it is in the future. And so it was, a complete shock for me, to be honest.
Even with Annabelle heading up ARIA, you thought, well, okay, history tells me it's a male role, so I'll probably be overlooked.
Now I know Annabelle, and remember it's the board's decision to vote, not Annabelle's. But now I know Annabelle. I didn't know Annabelle that well then. Annabelle was new, and Annabelle is amazing. And, I love working with Annabelle. So, but at that stage, we were in COVID. I think we'd met in person once. We'd met, spoke on the phone and Zoomed and all that and had, board meetings. But, it was the board's support, obviously, because they're the ones that vote. And, I was just, overwhelmed with the response that I got in support from the industry and from people I knew, people I didn't know, people I'd met once by various forms. Like I would say I got like 700 messages in various ways, whether it be Instagram message, an email, a phone call, a text message, it kind of made me realise what a significant moment that was just for change. But as you say, Annabelle, now I know Annabelle so well and we work so closely together. Like, she is an amazing woman in our industry. So, but the board have been so supportive of me, and during that time, I like I said, I just had no idea that I would even be an option. So
can you unpack for us how a board at ARIA chooses the chair? So how did that come about? And why was it a surprise? Did you not even think you were in the running? Did you apply? Tell us about the process.
I didn't apply, no. It's a voting system. I obviously can't go into too much board information, but it is voted on by the board, and someone could elect you to be voted on, and you have to accept. Obviously, if someone said, I elect Natalie, and I say, well, I don't want that, then I wouldn't. But so it's as simple as that. And there's sometimes lead up discussions, but it's it's at a board meeting and it's voted on, and that's the way it went.
And my curiosity is that the last chairman was also the head of a major. They're a commercial business. They're there to make profit. And you're at a non-for-profit, effectively, or government organisation. Do you feel that the fact that you're head of the ABC as opposed to the head of other major companies that are commercial, that are a commercial business, do you feel like that kind of puts you in a place of less conflict of interest, perhaps, than a chair that might be at as a head of a major?
I'm not really sure. But so, look, what I will say is, although I am at the ABC, non-for-profit, I work for the music label that sits in the commercial area of the ABC. So we make money, and so we have a profit each financial year, which we give that 100% of our profit back into the ABC. So we're operating in a commercial environment, but in a non-commercial organisation. But that money all goes back into supporting ABC programming and ABC, at large. So,
and is it run like a commercial business where you get bonuses and staff are incentivized to grow revenue, and then if the business doesn't make revenue, is there a risk of it being shut down? Like, is it backstopped and sort of socialized in a way that if it's not going well, it's all good, we still need this as a program, or is it purely there for commercial gain for the ABC?
Look, obviously there are budgets to meet and targets, but I think the arts is very important to the ABC, and in my position, in what I do, I am there to make a profit. Anything more about the ABC above my head would be a question for somebody else, but yeah, I am there to make money and give back to the ABC, but also support the various programs and brands across the ABC. So there are things that we may do that may not make money, but we know we're extending that brand or the audience and the reach, because the ABC is there to reach all Australians, and so being on commercial platforms or releasing something commercially reaches more Australians in the way they consume music in my world. So there definitely is a profit.
That's an interesting line, reaching more Australians as well, because one of the things I love about ABC Music is there's this focus on local artists, Australian artists, and focus on really different genres as well, genres that some of the other labels don't really focus on. Obviously, children's music is one of them with the Wiggles and a bunch of others. Is that a great point of difference for you? Do you see that as a competitive advantage when you compare yourself to other labels?
Look, I think so. I think we've evolved into that. We've always played in the niche genres, and that and also a domestic roster. So that's, we do have some international artists, but predominantly it's a domestic roster. And you can just see by our ARIA nominations over the various decades, like, we really punch above our weight because we get nominated in those niche genres, like country and kids and jazz and classical and world, and look, it is, we do well in those areas, and I think we excel, and we've got expertise in those areas. We don't compete as much in, say, the pop space, because I suppose we don't have the clout that a major does have, and then the money and to risk, I suppose. So, but we are part. But
also, I think if the government was competing with commercial businesses, Australian businesses, it probably might not be the purpose of what. To me, the incredible thing about what Triple J was and what ABC Music is doing is that they're investing in super important parts in the arts that the commercial companies just don't want to do or can't do or whatever. So, if the ABC did start to compete with the commercial businesses, I feel like it would kind of lose what is so special. Why it's so special.
What do you mean when you say what Triple J was?
Maybe I said was maybe it's a Freudian slip because I think the playlists with the commercial stations are maybe becoming more similar. But at least when it started, no one was playing all that, like the kind of music Triple J were. And maybe because the playlists are becoming so similar is because Triple J was so successful. So the commercials are now trying to like kind of cut their lunch.
Yeah, interesting.
So, and I think that is what is so brilliant about that whole ABC model. And so it kind of makes sense that you guys wouldn't be going after pop stars because that's well and truly serviced by the commercial industry, you know?
Also, those music videos are so expensive to create. Like, if you're a pop star, you got to spend a lot.
Yeah, and I think things like, so talking of Triple J, like a version and recently Bars of Steel, and just, that's something the audience want to, they tune in on Friday, hear their like a version, and they want to then consume it again. And so for us to put that on commercial platforms for people to have it on demand, whether it be, YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, wherever they consume their music. And, so that's all part of the ABC's reach. So, and they are commercial platforms, so the ABC should receive money for that and therefore pay through to the artists. And
Do you guys get any favours with Triple J because you're under the same ABC umbrella?
No, we don't. We have to pitch like anyone else. If you mean like our signed artists, no, absolutely not. We often won't be the people that would pitch in, would be our publicists with our partner. Definitely not. Very, very careful of that. When we did pitch in the Wiggles like a version, I was really nervous, to be honest, and because I just didn't know how it would go, and it was so well received, and
couldn't have been more well received.
No.
What made you nervous about it?
I think because because it was us. Like, I think sometimes I'm worried. Like, I don't, we never wanted to be seen to be getting favours, and Triple J would never give us favours. I think it was, for me, it was like very obvious. But then in another way, I wasn't sure, whether Triple J would find it as obvious, and they did. They did, absolutely. Like, they were like, this is awesome. Let's do this straight away. There was no hesitation. So, and then the results sort of spoke for themselves.
Number one.
Yes.
Oh, my God. Well, let's talk about the Wiggles, actually, because they are our current cover stars of Rolling Stone. Oh. It was so incredible to work on. Jake worked on it, Bella worked on it, our creative director Katie worked on it. The shoot was insane. They were also extremely creative themselves working on it, and they wrote a song about being on the cover of Rolling Stone. What is it like to work with them compared to other artists that are maybe not in that genre on your label?
The Wiggles are very unique and amazing to work with, and it's always crazy. It's always, you never know what's happening next. The good thing about the Wiggles is they're so spontaneous and they're so hardworking. Like, they are always on, always working. I mean, they've done over 250 shows this year alone. Gosh. Like, and, I think actually 300 shows this year. And 2 arena shows. Like, it's just constant and spontaneous, which is great. And they've got everything in house, so they've got studios, they can film, and if you need something done, it can be done by them, time given, but the next day kind of thing. It's like, and they're fun people, they're entertainers, they're talented. Like, it's just an awesome group of people to be around, and that's including the actual Wiggles, but the Wiggles team too. So it is very unique. It's hard to explain. You kind of need to come into Wiggle World to understand, but it's awesome.
That's why we called our cover feature The Wacky World of the Wiggles, because it's so wacky.
It is wacky. Yeah, it is.
Do you feel like as the label you don't have to be as involved because they're an ideas machine? They have all of the resources at their feet, really, and their own team as well. Like, how involved is the label then in the day-to-day?
Look, actually very involved, and that's the other great thing about the relationship is, I mean, we've worked together for the ABC and the Wiggles like 30 years, myself over 24 years, and very collaborative. Like, we'll come to them with ideas, they'll come to us. Like, it's actually very much a two-way street, and that's what I love about it. Like, we're very involved in what they're doing, and we know what they're doing next. And, you know, as I said, there is a lot of spontaneity where they'll suddenly go, this is happening now, and you sort of go, great, let's just pivot and go that way. But yeah, it is very much a two-way street. So we probably speak to them almost every day.
Do you know what's wild to me though? They haven't won a Grammy, like a children's music Grammy. Why is that?
It's a very, very good question. It is wild to me too. Like, I don't understand how, you know, for arguably the biggest children's band in the world. I mean, they've sold out Madison Square Garden, you know, huge in the US, Canada, Australia, across the globe, and yeah, no Grammy. So maybe this year, maybe next year, next Grammys. That's what the goal is anyway.
Yeah.
That's actually a goal of ours.
It's interesting because I don't know that much about the Grammys voting process and how it works, but I know that they have a process in the lead up to nominations with the for your consideration process. You almost have to campaign before the campaign starts.
Yes, and it's, you know, because it's not how we roll here, and so we don't understand the process, and we've actually spent time learning the process, and you know, we actually are going after a Grammy nomination this year.
Good.
So fingers crossed. I think voting's open now, so not that we can vote, but you know, yeah, so we think of all the years, you think with number one album, number one Hottest 100, Rolling Stone covers, like, it's just, how can they not get a Grammy? At least a nomination.
So I'd love to chat about you taking over the reins as the ARIA chair. That happened last year. What month was that? July. So just over a year now. And I'm curious to know, there was a very, I guess, big personality in the chair before. And so I would imagine now that there has been almost a complete opposite person in the chair now, that there's a huge change in direction. So what are the things that ARIA are doing now where you feel like the vision's changed, the way you operate's different? Like, what can you talk to us about any pivots or movements within ARIA since that sort of changing of the guard?
Look, you know, I can't really get into board, you know, discussions. I think what I can say is that, you know, ARIA is ever evolving and, you know, aligning with what's going on in the industry and making sure that we're making positive change, and, you know, we're not set in, you know, what we're doing. We're always listening and learning and seeing how we can improve, whether it be charts, whether it be awards. And, you know, I think, you know, that hasn't changed. Like, we have always been evolving. I think, you know, it is a fantastic group of people on the board. The ARIA team, headed up by Annabelle, you know, and then, you know, and Lynn Small, amazing people, amazing team. And I just think that's, you know, continued. And I think in this current time that we're in, which is a time of change and, you know, really stepping up and making, you know, hard decisions and listening to and learning from what we need to do next and how we can make a positive future for the industry. I think, you know, that's what we're doing and continue to do. And I think we've got the right team and the right board. And so I think, yeah, we're in a good place to make that change.
Yeah, there's the listening and learning thing's really interesting because obviously, you know, you would have seen all of the, you know, people talking about gender nominations and gender awards and stuff that was happening this week. And I think, like, how do you differentiate? So how are you... I'm curious to know about the process of listening and learning because, like, you know, there are some voices and some ideas which are more valid than others. You know, there are some people, just because you are the most offended doesn't mean you're the most right. And so how as a board do you then process, like, what is noise and what is real? If I look at, like, you know, the... and these are sincere questions, by the way. So, like, I'm trying to work out, you know, there was at some point, you know, we changed. I think it was 2001, maybe 2000, when there was the gendered awards went away. And
that was last year, 2021.
Cool. So, you know, I can imagine the thought process that went into why that decision was the case, and then it's about tracking the data, I imagine, and saying, what was the goal for a decision like that, and then what is the data that we're looking at to see if we're achieving that goal. And so I'm curious to know how you listen and learn at ARIA. Is it, do you listen to the person who makes the most noise on Twitter, or are you looking at data, or how are you guys, like, processing and adapting to these very complicated and sensitive decisions where no doubt whatever decision you make is going to piss people off, but how do you make sure that you feel what you're doing is right and kind of like assess the success or mistakes based on those kind of the outcomes that you see?
I think the decision around the gender-based award was based on inclusion, as I'm sure you're aware, and to include with non-binary, female, male, like it was an inclusive decision. And I think you're always going to get people that agree and disagree. The Grammys have done it for years. The Brits followed, did after us. And, it is about, that inclusiveness of the best solo artists. You've got the best group, which isn't gender-based and never has been. So so that was the reason for that decision. And, of course, no, not the loudest voice is the one we listen to. We listen to all the loudest and the quietest. And, there's, surveys and questionnaires and things that we ask during voting. And it's just always being open to feedback, whether it be directly from artists, managers, through labels, or however, we listen to everybody. So that's the only way we're going to learn, and it's definitely not just through the loudest voice.
So what I'm getting is that it's like more, I guess, qualitative assessments, talking to people and understanding, as opposed to looking at raw data metrics and going, we are more inclusive based on these metrics. Or for example,
we do look at metrics, like there's years like this year where actually we have 1% more females nominated this year, but it's cyclical. Like there's years where, say, Amy Shark won all the awards. It depends on releases and then who people vote for, and so we can't tell people who to vote for, and it's not the board's decision, it's not the staff's decision, and so it is. Is looking at that and going, okay, so, we do take that data. We look at, how amazing this year First Nations have represented, artists are represented, and we look at the genres and who entered the genres and the data on each genre. So data absolutely comes into it because you learn so much from data, and then you can make educated decisions for the next awards.
It's super interesting you talk about. I just want to stress this point that ARIA aren't choosing the nominations and choosing the winners. Like, it is the whole industry. I get a thing in my inbox that says, go and vote for who you want to ARIA. I don't know how many people are on that panel, but there are a lot of people on that panel. Yeah. It's the industry that votes. So,
and then the public too.
Yeah, there's for some categories. So, like, I think the anger towards the, lack of representation for whatever, for whatever group of people that you feel is underrepresented is misguided if it's guided at ARIA, I believe. And of course, like, there is some sort of influence that ARIA would have on choosing, are we going to have gendered awards or not? I think that's a really, key decision of influence. But then who actually gets voted for is not within your influence.
That's right.
I parallel it to when everybody was really angry at the promoters for the festival diversity issues on the lineup. And I always said, even back then, that the promoters are downstream. They can only catch what comes downstream. What is the artist that will sell the most tickets so that they can have a viable business? Now, how do more females and more people of all diverse backgrounds get downstream? Well, that starts up at label investments, radio play, media coverage. If all the promoters can do is catch what's downstream, then you could summarize that it's probably not their fault if their lineup isn't that diverse. Now, there's grey area in there. Of course, there are some promoters who could be doing more than others, but as a general rule across the board, I felt like they got a really raw deal. And I see ARIA, based on the backlash that's happening this week, almost going through a similar thing where, for starters, promoters were picking the lineups. ARIA aren't picking the nominations, so they're even more step removed. But they are downstream of what is getting commercial traction. Who are the types of artists that are selling a lot of records, selling a lot of tickets, doing all of that, getting a lot of radio play? These are the artists that get nominated for ARIA Awards and win ARIA Awards. It is not ARIA's fault if there is not a diversity of artists that are selling a lot of tickets and selling a lot of records. Like, that problem needs to be solved upstream.
Absolutely.
And so I'm really paralleling kind of what your organisation is going through now to what the promoters were going through, maybe 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also think that any backlash that's happening right now towards the ARIAs, in a huge way, just legitimizes the ARIA Awards as a ceremony. Like, I think that anyone who's out there saying, actually, fuck the ARIAs, we don't need them, what you're really telling me is that they're important to you and that you care. And that's why it's important.
Absolutely. And look, that's the thing. I mean, we care about diversity. We care about inclusion, and we want the most inclusive and diverse ARIAs. But you're right, it starts at the source, and it starts at who's being voted for. What we can do is make sure we're including presenters and performances, and but again, with performances, there's highly nominated artists, but that's where we can do a bit more. But it is about who gets voted on by the judging panel, and which starts at the source on who's selling tickets, who's streaming numbers.
Can you talk us about the move of the ARIA Awards from the casino chip location to the Horden across the road from our office?
We just wanted to make it more convenient for you.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
And we use this as a change room.
You literally could if you wanted to. Could be the green room.
Yes. Well, look, I mean, the Horden is iconic, right? For I think my first concert that I went to without my mum was at the Horden Pavilion.
Who was that you went and saw?
It was a line. It was Hoodoo Gurus headlining, and it was where the entrance faced the other way. And I think I was like 14. My first concert was Eurythmics with my mum. I was
a good one.
12. I was in year 7, and I was very tired. She took me to an after party, and my stepfather was in the film industry, and he filmed a lot of concerts, and so my mum was very my upbringing for music. She's the reason I love music and around music. My brother's a DJ, my sister's a DJ. Like, it's just music, in our household. And so she took me to a Eurythmics concert, and the next day I failed my science exam, and I was very upset.
Thanks, Mum.
I was like 12, and but Horden Pavilion. It's just an iconic venue, and I think the partnerships is a great partnership, and I think it's going to be amazing. I think it's a perfect space for an ARIA Awards.
So just back to speaking on diversity and inclusion within the ARIA Awards and everything, Dan Rosen actually was quite public about it. He made a public apology about the snubbing of Sampa the Great's best hip hop release, When. That was during the broadcast in 2019. Kait was also slightly snubbed there. And I'll read the apology that he said in 2020. He said, "I regret we didn't take the opportunity to provide the national platform that those wins warranted, and I apologise for that." I thought that was a really great move on his part, and really important to recognise that. But I wondered if you could take me into the boardroom with the chats that followed that backlash. Like, was there a conversation around it? What were the outcomes, if so?
Well, I can't really take you into the boardroom.
You're not allowed in there.
No,
Got
not
it.
allowed in there. The door is closed. But Dan obviously had represented us well, and I suppose that's the result, right? But there, I can't really go into what was discussed at the time. But what I can say is that like I've said before, we're always looking to improve, always looking to evolve with the industry and change where we need to change, and listen and learn, and be inclusive of all music and artists.
Can I ask a hypothetical question? If we see the data over the next 5 years, hypothetically, and with the intent that the non-gendered awards or removing gendered awards is to become more inclusive, actually results in women significantly getting less wins, would ARIA look at that data and go, okay, maybe we need a change? Or is there something else you're considering when you've made that decision that outcome wouldn't influence a change back?
Look, I couldn't say it would or it wouldn't. That would be something that would need to be discussed with the board. That's not my decision to solely make or comment too much on, but I'd just say that we'd always be looking at the data. So, I can't say we wouldn't or we would. I can just say that we'd look at the data and see what it's telling us, and seeing how we evolve and keep moving forward.
You mentioned that women are more represented. You mentioned that women are more represented in this year's nominations too, as well. So that's really good. Given last year, gendered awards were gotten rid of, and now we actually see an uptick in women, which is interesting. And also I can see there's a huge concerted effort in terms of the voting process. Like, I found it really interesting when I went on, and it asked me these profiling questions of like my nationality and where I'm from and whether I identify as First Nations. So is that part of a larger remit around ensuring diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the judging panel we want a diverse group of people judging. So, collecting that data helps us make sure that we have, enough people, the right people, and a diverse group of people. And so, those questions are very helpful if you answered them. Thank you, to help inform us of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Country music. So obviously you're a huge major player in that world. How can we get more local country artists, not only on the global stage, but on the main stage here in Australia? We have so many incredible country music festivals. CMC Rocks is soon. That's a really good example of one where we could get our local artists on those major stages as headliners. How can we make that happen?
The $1 million question. Look, country music is something that a genre that I didn't grow up with, that through working with ABC Music, that I learnt to love and respect and have a very strong passion for, seeing country music in Australia succeed. And I think we have so much talent, and I see what's happening in America, in Nashville, and just in the States in general, what a huge genre it is. And and it's exciting to see the changes and the rumblings here. We've got more country festivals than we ever did. We have, international artists coming to Australia and really taking Australia as a serious market. We're the third market in the world, US, Canada, then Australia, for country music as a genre. I think, festivals like CMC Rocks, tours, I think it's really important that Australians get on those stages, and they do. And so if you've got Morgan Wallen, for example, headlining tour as a festival, then to have Travis Collins on that stage, at that festival, it helps the Australian artists be on that same stage. In saying that, I think the country fans are so loyal, very, very loyal, and whether it's an all Australian lineup or there's internationals, where there's a very loyal fan base. But we need to, and this is what the goal is, to be able to have Australian artists recognised outside of Australia in a global way, and they not have to move to Nashville to do so. At the moment, you really do need to move to Nashville to have that. And there's just such amazing talent here. I mean, we've got people like Lee Kernaghan, who has had over 30 years a career, and does national tours, and he's a household name. But then you've got the young artists that are coming up, which are really exciting to see. That I think the 20-year-olds these days, the younger people, aren't looking at genres as much as we used to in my age group, I suppose. They just look at a song, and you can see that with Luke Combs. Like, Luke Combs sold out in seconds, I think it was, minutes. And he's not getting mainstream radio, he's not getting mainstream playlists, but he has this mainstream appeal and has a really young audience. And it's so how do we take that young audience for Luke Combs and go, well, hey, we've got a whole lot of amazing artists here ourselves, so that are fantastic, and to give them that fan base too. So it's a genre of a lot of potential, and I think it's going in the right direction. I think DSPs, media, radio are taking notice. I think there could be more notice taken, and I think we should be trying to propel our Aussies into the global market more.
Yeah, 100%. I'm in a CMC Rocks like fan group on Facebook, and it's the most active Facebook group I'm in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know. It's and I mean, there's so many great festivals. And there's in the Discovery festivals like Groundwater, which is a free festival in Broadbeach, you know, and then there's, you know, Gympie Muster and Denny and Savannah, and there's just, you know, so many, and they're popping up everywhere. There was a new one in Port Macquarie, I forgot the name of them, so sorry, but yeah, they're getting these big audiences and this young audience, and I think maybe the media and the radio and TV probably just a step behind seeing that. And when you go there and see the audience, like I just went to CMC Rocks in September, and there's kids and families, but there's a lot of 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds singing along to songs that haven't been on mainstream radio. They haven't been on mainstream playlists, and so they're discovering them, and they're engaging with them and buying a festival ticket and buying a ticket to their show. So it's an exciting time, but also I think, you know, we've got lots of work to do.
Natalie, you don't do many interviews, so we're very grateful that you've come on for at the top. Your career is incredibly impressive. The Australian industry as a whole is very lucky to have you at the chair of ARIA. We're very grateful. I want you to leave us with something about what you want your legacy to be, either when eventually you hang up the boots at ARIA or at ABC or whatever it is in your career. How do you want to be remembered by? And then after that, it would be awesome if you could share us a mistake you've made and what we can learn from that.
Oh gosh, what do I want to be remembered for? Like, I'm very much not in front of camera, in front of, you know, microphone kind of person. I'm very much a behind the scenes person. But I suppose I just want to be remembered for nurturing talent and giving, you know, I always think there's so many talented people out there, and you need to give them the opportunity to be heard. And so, I don't know, I suppose I'd want people to think that, you know, that I gave them that opportunity, that I helped their career. Like, I think of there's so many artists, particularly young females recently on our label, like Lil Quirks, Melanie Dyer, Imogen Rain, Caitlin Chabot, that are coming through, that I think, you know, I'd love to see them, you know, break through, and sort of that I had a hand in that, I suppose, and just give them a voice, give them a stage, give them the opportunity. I suppose that's kind of pretty obvious, but that's
awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, I love the Little Quirks. One of my favourite gigs I've ever been to.
Oh,
yeah,
how
so
much
fun.
you just can't help but smile and jump.
It's so joyful.
It's just so joyful. I first saw them at Big Sound, and I just was like, oh my God, I'm so happy when I left this. Yeah.
So please tell us your biggest fuck up, your biggest mistake, something we can take and learn from.
Oh God. Oh gosh, I feel like there's so many mistakes. You kind of, and the biggest thing is learning from your mistakes. I'm just trying to think of my biggest mistake. I mean,
maybe it's not the biggest. What comes to mind?
Maybe the one you learnt from the most. You learnt the most from.
I suppose this is not a singular mistake. It's probably more of a thing where I didn't speak up a lot in my sort of 20s and 30s. I felt like I had a lot to say, but I didn't say it. And probably that's something I've learnt.
Do you mean socially or within the organisation?
Within the organisation. And, you know, I think I was, you know, and that's probably due to who was there at the time and whatever. And so then I had an amazing boss, Robert Patterson, who really gave me a voice. And then I realised how much I actually do know this. How
did he give you a voice?
He listened to me, asked me. He, he also sort of mentored me, and he guided me. And so I felt listened to. So the more you listen to, the more you kind of say, right? So, and I think that's something then I've learned, that I'm not going to say I'm perfect at this either, but that I want to make sure that everyone in my team has a voice and is listened to. So, because you just never know what someone, you know, whether it be an artist they've found, or whether it be, you know, an idea, or whether it be a strategy, whatever it is, like, you know, we can learn so much off each other. Like, you know, just because there's a hierarchy, it doesn't mean that the people at the top know everything. Like there's, so I think that's probably what I learnt from what I'd say was a mistake. So it's not kind of one thing, it's a thing. But,
yeah, no, that's awesome. When someone gives you the space and permission to speak, you're more relaxed, and then just the ideas start flowing. There's no like anxiety around sharing things that are going to help because you'd been there a while. You knew you knew your stuff. You just needed to be given the space in order to share that knowledge.
Yeah, and not feel stupid. Like, you know, feel heard. So, yeah. So
Natalie, thank you so much. That was awesome.
You.
I really appreciate it.
That was awesome.
Thank you so much.